This is Gerardo Del Real along with my co-host, Mr. Nick Hodge, the AR-15 branding Nick Hodge. This is episode 21 of Bizarro World. All sorts of madness going on, Nick. Mr. Trump wants beer and wok to be a lot more expensive. The 10-year yield is down to multi-year lows. R. Kelly's facing at least 30 years in prison. The Chinese are threatening to cut off the rare earth supply to the world again. I'm exaggerating. And we got to get your Game of Thrones recap, which I skipped last week because I didn't want to spoil it for those that hadn't watched it. It's been a week, but let's talk markets. First and foremost, how are you, sir?
I'm doing really good, Gerardo. I got a 3-year-old birthday party this weekend we're gearing up for. Going to take her to lunch after we record this. So excited to get to the weekend. It has been a crazy week both in the markets or I should say was a crazy week last week in the markets, both with stock prices and sectors, and we'll talk about it. And I'm doing good. How are you?
Excellent. My mom is running away from the tariffs and is coming from Mexico to visit us. Half of that is true. She is on the way, so she'll arrive later tonight. She'll be stopping by for a week, but things are great. Let's get right to it. The Trumpster. Let's start with the markets. He's threatened to impose tariffs on Mexico, 5% on Mexican imports, and could scale up to 25% in October. The first round of tariffs are scheduled to be imposed on June the 10th. The market has not liked it. The 10-year is down to 2.14% as we speak. Gold is the beneficiary. I've said all year long, I've actually said it for quite a while now, that gold is going to be a second half of the year story. We just broke 1,300. It's at 1,306 as we speak. The dollar's taking a bit of a hit, down to 97.77, down 40 basis points. Thoughts, Nick? Is this the catalyst that gold needed to rally?
You don't get a yawn this week. I figured that I had gotten 3 yawns in a row, and so I queued up a little personal trade in a gold leveraged ETF yesterday, and
well done, sir.
Blind squirrels and such. And so, yeah, not a yawn. Gold back over 1,300. I don't know if this is it, but lots of factors are lining up. The bond things, as you said, which I don't dabble in too much, but broad markets looking weak, certainly in correction territory. The trade stuff definitely weighing on emerging markets. I was seeing some charts out of Sprott this week showing that trade volumes were down to where they are in 2008, which was a bit scary to see. And so, yeah, definitely softness in the broader markets. Money looking to safe havens. We had said for 2 weeks in a row that some sneaky money was going into Bitcoin. And look, here it is. Now the market's down on this Friday, 300 points as we talk, and has had a rough go of it this week. Sell in May and all that combining. So it could be. I hope it is. And while the market certainly doesn't love the Trumpster tariffs, I was reading this morning that his approval rating is actually the highest it's been since he's taken office. So the world is a paradox.
The world is a paradox, and the bottom line is people tend to be what's the right word? Let's say impulsive. People like black and white. People don't like gray areas. These tariffs have a lot of nuances. States where I live, states across the country are going to be affected. I live in Texas. Texas is going to be disproportionately affected if this actually comes to pass. And so it's going to be interesting. You mentioned that capital is looking for a safe haven. And it absolutely is. You can see it. You can see it in the fact that silver is only up, I think, 0.4%, while gold has rallied over 1.5%. So yeah, it's definitely interesting times. I mentioned that the 10-year here is at 2.14. Interestingly enough, we're about to see what that clean as dirty shirt analogy that I've been saying for the past 3 years is about. Because if you go to Germany, that same 10-year, their equivalent is a negative 0.02. So, a 2.14 yield doesn't seem like a lot. It's a lot when you compare it to what you get in Europe, right?
Well, yeah, and the Fed's going to have to cut. We've talked about this before. More and more people are tweeting and writing about it now. I saw you mention it on Twitter today. So go ahead and talk about that. I mean, frame it out. How do you to see it shaping up? I mean, you've said there was a cut coming. What's next?
Absolutely. I think that's exactly what's happening. We have an election cycle. The Fed is not going to cut or raise rates, I don't believe, in 2020 unless we have another global financial crisis, which, again, if a bond market blows up somewhere, it's not out of the realm of possibility. But in the meantime, I think what people can definitely expect is at least a quarter point, maybe half a point cut here at the next Fed meeting, definitely before year end. The market is going to force the Fed's hand, as it always does. The Fed has capitulated. They did so a couple of meetings ago, and they've made it very clear that it's paying attention. And again, I think that's why you're seeing capital flee into the safe havens, gold, cryptos, the treasury market. So, if you're a contrarian, this is the time to make sure that you have the best names in the gold space, the Almaden Minerals of the world, the Midas Golds of the world, the Revival Golds of the world. Pick your favorite gold play and make sure that you're positioned, because I think I think this could be it. There's too many factors happening simultaneously that I don't see all of them being resolved. We have a trade war with China. We now have this situation with Mexico. We have an election cycle. We have growth, global growth, slowing down. And that's really the Fed's worst fear. And that's all central banks' worst fear is deflation. It's not inflation. They don't care about savers. They care about the stock market. They care about the elites. So yeah, expect a bit of a hit in the markets in the short term, and then expect the Fed to come in, and not just the Fed, but central banks around the world. I see globally coordinated stimulus happening, and I think, asset bubbles are getting ready to get blown up to levels that we haven't seen in quite a bit. So get ready and get positioned, people. That's coming.
It's an interesting choice of three companies you did there. I think I subliminally got in your head this week. I was writing about all three of those yesterday. And early advantage. And speaking of contrarian, I'm going to play host for a little bit because you need to talk about China and the rare earths, because as we know, everyone this week is a rare earth expert and is writing that they have been writing about rare earths, but they fucking haven't. So go ahead and tell them and tell them about rare earths and what's going on.
I'm going to keep it very simple. We've seen this play out. We saw it happen in 2010 in the first rare earth mania. A lot of people made a lot of money in the early stages of it. A lot of people that got there late to that party lost a lot of money. So, the Chinese brass, per se, visiting the rare earth facility here about a week or two ago, we touched on it on the podcast last week, I believe, was not a coincidence. They're everything that's done out of China comes with purpose and meaning, right? And so everybody should have seen it coming when they made a public visit, that they were going to start whispering to the world that, look, this is where we actually can flex a little bit. We have control of the bulk of the global supply of rare earths. And bottom line is, you can bring some online, but we will flood the market and beat you with price. And that's exactly what they did in 2010. I remember analysts writing about Molycorp, which was positioned to provide the U.S. With these very valuable rare earths. And what happened is China just flooded the market and bankrupted them. So, I think we're in the early stages of that right now. I think it's a jab. It's not the body shot that is coming. And that body shot is going to be the selling of treasuries. And then, this is a long-term game for China. So this is how I see it. Let me stop rambling. This is how I see it playing out. China threatens to cut off the rare earth supply to the U.S. Europe and the U.S. scramble to somehow make this trade war less aggressive. China backs up. All the companies that have tripled and quadrupled probably pull back a little bit. China slowly but surely continues to build their financial infrastructure. And, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, They won't hold just 17% of our treasuries. They'll hold a lot more. And when the U.S. is vulnerable, that's when you're going to see a flooding of the market of treasuries, kind of like we saw them flood the market with rare earths back in 2010. So the thing that I think will happen that I haven't seen anybody talk about is WTO, right? The World Trade Organization. They're the only reason that China scaled back the last time this happened in 2010. There was a complaint filed by the U.S. That the Chinese were manipulating the market, which they were, and so the WTO told them to cut it out. I don't believe that China is interested in maintaining their WTO membership in good standing for more than the next couple of years. And the reason I say that is if you look at, the Silk Road, as it's been called, which is this massive, massive infrastructure project that China has rolled out. This is, trillions of dollars in investments around the world. There's 100 countries that are beneficiaries of Chinese capital, Chinese technological advantages. And, they're investing everywhere, Nick. They're running the long-term game beautifully. And it's just a matter of time. It's a matter of time before it's our turn to be number 2 on the financial global scale. So it's definitely interesting times. There's going to be a lot of starts and pullbacks and 2 steps forward and 1 step back. But, I think a decade from now, we're going to look back and 2019 is going to be a pivotal year in the changing of the global infrastructure picture.
First of all, we got to do a promo about that. So I'm going to take some notes because the whole Silk Road America number 2 is too good not to do a newsletter promotion on. And yeah, you said it beautifully. There was a couple of reports out in the past week about how China has been gobbling up assets, and you can look at whatever, lithium in South America or base metals in Africa through their investments in companies like Ivanhoe. They are definitely positioning themselves in some of the tier 1 assets of the metals that will power the future. And this week there was a report out about U.S. farmland and how much of it is now foreign owned, and how farmers are aging and their kids are wanting to take over, and so now U.S. farmland is increasingly going into foreign hands. So all that is exactly what you were saying, and definitely part of the long game.
Agreed. So that was my short version. I'm going to write an article about it. Go to outsiderclub.com. You'll see it on Monday if Nick is kind enough to publish that for me.
There you go.
And yeah, we'll get into a little bit more detail and specifics there in the article that went out to subscribers of Junior Mining Monthly. As you know, there's a company that I've been fond of that has not done well for us up until recently, and I think that it was just a matter of time before the rare earth dragon kind of surfaced again, right? And here we are.
Well, they're critical, right? I mean, I know it might sound like old hat or everybody's talking about it, but you need them for everything, right? Defense, satellites, missiles, iPhones, and so they're super, super critical to everything that we take for granted, and things that no one thinks about but now are starting to, and that's what moves markets.
Correct. Agreed. What else we got, Nick?
You tell me.
What's on your mind? I want to talk about you showing off your AR-15. I said showing off. Those are my words, not yours. But you're running around Baltimore downtown with an AR-15. Explain that to me.
I wasn't. So I think that. Well, first of all, I think that part of a podcast needs to be stories and getting to know the host and using the experience of the host and guests to make points, etc. Right? That might go without saying. And so I just wanted to get into the habit of just sharing experiences and stories with you, like I did with the turkey, for example, last week. And so with the events that were in the news this week going on in downtown Baltimore, which I will quickly recap, I wanted to share this story with you. So in the past week, there were some videos that surfaced of what seemed like a couple of dozen kids that were, I don't know how else to say it. They were wailing on people, man. They were holding them by the hair.
Fight Club, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they were just beating people up in the most prominent tourist area of Baltimore, right downtown in the harbor, where all the nice restaurants and hotels and whatever Hard Rock, etc. So it got me thinking, and then I had seen some news coverage of it, which didn't really show the whole videos, but showed just a still of it, and I saw some of the comments from one of the city councilmen who was sort of downplaying it and was saying that it was just a couple of kids who were running on the roofs of cars when the video clearly showed them beating up multiple people and people running in directions scattering from the violence. And ultimately there were 6 arrests, but and we've talked about Baltimore before, the current state it's in. So I was thinking about this time that I had purchased a firearm, as I'm known to do, and I went to pick it up, and after my wait period was over, and I think I had bought it at a gun show, and I had to go pick it up from the gun dealer that had his booth at the gun show. Anyway, I went to pick it up, and I went back to work. I think I went on my lunch break. This was years ago, and I was showing somebody in the parking lot at work, because it's an interesting thing, guys like guns, whatever. I had it laying in the back seat of my truck, and this other guy walked out in the parking lot, and I was just showing it to him. That was it. Then I put it back in my truck and locked the door. And I could see my truck from my desk. It wasn't like I just left a gun, anyway. And so listen,
Don't justify it and clean it up now, Nick.
This is
it out loud.
This is the most interesting part. So I'm back at my desk, and my phone rings, and I answer my phone, and it's the Baltimore police. And in retrospect, I mean, that's crazy, right? Like, how did they get my number? Anyway, so they're like, "This is the Baltimore police. Did you have an AR-15 like downtown, whatever?" And I was like, I told them what I just told you. Yeah, I legally purchased it. I went to pick it back up. I was showing somebody out in the parking lot, and then they started peppering me with questions. My memory is honestly a bit fuzzy on everything that was coming out of the person's mouth, but I had. My worldview and my political leanings, so my mind immediately went to
leave me the fuck alone.
Right, exactly.
Right.
So the next thing that came out of my mouth was, "Am I being charged with a crime?" And they were like, "No," and they proceeded to ask me a couple more questions. And again, my mind is still fuzzy because my heart was pumping and my etc. So again, I asked, "Am I being charged with a crime?" And they said no. And I said, "Do you have any more questions?" And that was sort of the end of that. But just a couple of points in retrospect. I mean, somebody must have seen me and called the police, right? I don't think the police saw me. It wasn't like some eye in the sky or anything. So I'm convinced somebody saw whatever in an adjacent office or whatever and called the police. But for them to track me down, I mean, clearly they got my license plate is what happened, right? Identified who was the owner of the vehicle, and then somehow associated that through some database online with my phone number, and were able to contact me in a matter of minutes, which is fucking scary. That's the first thing, right? And the second thing is, you got roving gangs of kids downtown beating people up, and Maryland is a state where you can't openly carry a weapon. You can't get a permit to carry a weapon, even if you apply for it, unless you're a business owner or can prove that there was a threat against your life, because Maryland is not a shall issue state, which means they don't have to issue you a license if you apply for it. They're a may issue state as opposed to a shall issue. And any state that's a may issue state, it was like when your mother said maybe, it always meant no, right? You can never
right.
get your
Yep.
you can never get your permit. And so I don't know. Just that juxtaposition of my experience with pulling out a gun for 15 seconds that I legally owned to show someone, and they were on my ass, as opposed to dozens of kids beating people up where they can't control it or won't control it, and then it's downplayed in the media. It just, I don't know. It was just something I wanted to talk about. I thought it was a point of discussion and highlighted where the city was at in terms of priorities and maybe how things went wrong. And clearly they're at a place now where what they were trying to keep on the eastern and western fringes of the city is spilling over into downtown. And it's just funny, not funny, it's sad actually. The quotes from the mayor who's only been mayor for a little bit because the other bitch just had to step down for peddling books, healthy Holly books to hospitals or whatever the hell was going on. It's like they more lament the fact that it happened in a tourist area than it's happening. Does that make sense? They're like, oh,
it's always about the money, right?
Right. It's like, oh, we're sorry that it's downtown.
Dollars.
Right. Yes. Exactly.
Yeah. Not sorry that all of our major institutions in the city are failing. That's not the problem. The problem is that how is this going to look if you're considering a lovely vacation down by the harbor in Baltimore, right?
I just booked our hotel rooms, Gerardo. I'll see you there in 3 weeks.
Hey, I'll bring I'll bring my boxing gloves with me.
I was gonna say I was joking with the Outsider Club staff. I'm bringing my expandable baton, baby. I'm packing that thing in my check luggage.
You know what that brings me to something. When I was growing up, I don't know why I thought of this, but I'm gonna ramble about it anyway. When I was growing up, I was a big Bruce Lee fan, right? And I thought it'd be cool to make Chinese stars. So there was a metal factory up the street from where I lived, and my dad worked there for a little bit. And so he made me these cool metal Chinese stars, which I took to school and got caught with. And, you know, the teacher called my parents in, and my dad was like, yeah, I made them the Chinese stars. But I think about nowadays what would happen if my, 10, 11-year-old got caught with Chinese stars at school. He'd probably get expelled.
Oh, well, that's right where my brain went. I was going to say that. I was like, yeah, you're lucky. You would have been expelled now, for sure.
Different time. Yeah, I used to take Chinese stars and nunchucks. Did you know they made nunchucks illegal after, like, a lot of the Bruce Lee movies? I didn't know that. I read that somewhere this week. Another random, useless fact. I
did not know that, but I came across a viral video of a sheriff talking about gun control, and it ended up being my sheriff that here in Spokane. It was the Spokane County sheriff talking about. Well, I'm just going to tell you what he was talking about. He was saying, when I went to high school, 30-40% of the trucks in the parking lot had rifles with gun racks in them because all the good old boys, they had gone elk or deer hunting before school, and they were going back elk or deer hunting after school. And he was saying that, he was like, so ask yourself, he was saying, what's changed? He was saying, did the gun change? He was saying, or did the culture and the people change? And it was just, I don't know. I thought it was a good point. And he was, the point I'm making was just what you said. If, you were to show up with a gun rack now in a high school parking lot with your 30-06 or whatever, pick your caliber. SWAT is coming. I mean, so it's just crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, different times. It's the bizarro world, man. If this week hasn't highlighted it, whether we're talking markets or we're talking just, politics, you name it, it's getting crazier by the day.
I like it.
Let's get serious a little bit. I know you wanted to talk about the dark web, and I wanted to talk about R. Kelly, and I think the two go hand in hand. R. Kelly is now facing 30 years in prison for being a sick fuck. He's facing he faced 10 counts of aggravated criminal sex abuse against 4 women. He now has a new 11-count indictment. That indictment is probably going to stick, just judging by the number of charges and the fact that it's on the heels of the other indictment. You wanted to talk about the dark web. It's some sick shit out there. There's some sick people out there. Enlighten us, Nick.
There's nothing to be enlightened about. The facts are out there. It seems that some very prominent people in the world, I mean, let's just put it like it is, in popular culture and media, or in religion, or in politics, as we've talked about before, have connections to or have been found to be directly involved in sexual relations with minors and or outright pedophilia rings. And so I mean, there's not much else to talk about. The whole Catholic thing is well known. There was 5 more priests that were charged this week or last week in Michigan under a new investigation. That is well known. It's clearly widespread in every country and every state. And then I just saw this story last week that really just was like a flash in the pan, and then it was gone. I didn't see it like, I don't know, like trending anywhere or on a bunch of major websites or, I didn't hear anybody mention it. It just didn't stick around in the news. And it was this international pedophilia ring, international pedophile ring that was busted, that they saved 50 kids from, but that was being run online from Thailand and Australia. But had members all over the world. And so 9 people were arrested in the United States that were apparently, and this is the really messed up, fucked up part, is prominent members of society. All the news articles said was Interpol said that, it was Interpol who did this, said that they were in positions of public trust. But the names weren't released. Like, why are we withholding the names of these people? It's because, the tinfoil hat for a second. I'll say it's because like it's a fact, but like why else would you withhold the names of these people unless they had connections such that they could keep their names withheld, right? At least the way I read it. I mean, granted, they could be cooperating with them for something larger, but I don't think so, man. It seems like this stuff is always like flash in the pan, eradicated from the news, never fully fleshed out, and it just seems like an international pedophile ring being run on the dark web that has 9 prominent members of U.S. society arrested would be bigger news.
Whose names we don't know.
Right.
Yeah, that's nuts. It's sick as well. For those not familiar, can you explain the dark web?
Oh God, I think the answer is no.
Loaded question.
Yeah, the answer is no, but I'm gonna try. So I probably shouldn't. I mean, it's a part of the internet that is behind a curtain. Let's call it. Just like you couldn't see the wizard in the Wizard of Oz, and you're looking at a screen. The dark web is unseeable to the search engines and bots, etc., that crawl the front-facing web through encrypted servers and sites that are protected. And I'm just going to leave it there before I start sounding really dumb.
No. I thought that's well said. I don't think many people are familiar with the dark web. I don't believe that most people realize that this is like a real thing. I think they think it's like a metaphor for something or an analogy. This is a real thing where obviously, I hear a lot of people describe it as, the only pure internet. But there's a lot of sick shit that goes on in the only pure internet. And I think it speaks to society and, the darker impulses among us humans, right?
Well, yeah, drug trade, literally human trafficking, the buying and selling of humans. So yeah, real sick shit. I mean, yeah, counterfeit, high art, etc. Digital terrorism and I mean, look back to Baltimore. The city's computers have been held for ransom for the past couple of weeks. I think they're asking, I forget, 8 or 9 Bitcoin or something like that. And so yeah, I mean, yep.
You can't make this shit up.
Yeah, yep.
But here we have, federal resources going to arresting people that have CBD oil, through the TSA at the airports, right? I mean, it's insane to me. It's insane to me the way we allocate tax dollars, not just in this country, everywhere.
Well, yeah, I mean, taxes are a crime, so yeah.
We'll leave that one there.
Yeah.
What else do we have going on? Somebody lit themselves on fucking fire at the White House, I believe is how you described it.
Yeah, and so also amazed this has disappeared from the news so quickly, considering it's the same exact event that kicked off the fucking Arab Spring. Jesus Christ, somebody lit themselves on fire on the White House lawn and nobody is talking about it. The guy died today. What's going on with you people? What's it going to take?
Did he die?
Yeah, he died. I think it's a he. I honestly haven't followed too close. But yeah, look, someone self-emulates, which is what it's called. That's the proper term. I think that's what it's called anyway. Self-emulates.
Let's call it that.
And if it's wrong, I'll post a link. Anyway, yeah, this is what someone did in Tunisia in, I forget what the year was, but this is the same event that kicked off the Arab Spring. Someone set themselves on fire and it caused entire nations to protest, and we ended up killing Muammar Gaddafi. Do you guys remember any of this, for crying out loud? And then someone just sets themselves on fire on the White House lawn, and it's like,
Yep. And here's the segue. That fruit vendor that lit himself on fire back a few years back, that kicked off the whole Arab Spring, was protesting being taxed for his vending permit. So there you go. It comes full circle, right?
Yeah, and it's like, I don't know. I don't even know if anybody's talking about this thing. I didn't see it mentioned much today. Did you? I mean, I could be. Maybe I'm overreacting, but it seems like it should
No.
It seems like it should be bigger
news. You would think, right? It's the White House?
Yeah.
All right. Can we talk Game of Thrones? Did you see the last episode? I know you did. I didn't ask you last week because I know that people, were still on spoiler alert, but it's been a week, so it's been 2.
I won't give you any spoilers. I know a lot of people didn't like it. We talked about that a bit and how they don't have a right to complain, produce your own show. I thought the ending, while maybe not 100% endorsed as well done, was it was entertaining. We got a new king who may or may not have deserved it. He didn't do any physical battle, but was pulling strings behind the scenes most of the time. The sort of messed up part was that the person who ended up being king had sort of this power that he could foresee the future. So it's kind of a logical clusterfuck when you really think about it, because if he knew that he was going to just ended up being king all along, then he could have saved a whole lot of stuff from happening. But hey, that's entertainment. We wrapped it up. It was no Breaking Bad, which is apparently unanimously one of the best series finales ever.
So good.
Really,
so good.
really
I loved
good.
That show.
Exactly. I enjoyed it as well. But nonetheless, it was entertaining, and it's over. And now I don't know what to do with my one open slot for media watching that I have on a weekly basis. I'll have to find something to fill it with. As you know, I don't. That was the only show I really watched.
So you were satisfied overall.
And I guess I'm not the only one, because I was satisfied overall, but to put a business stamp on it, HBO was really concerned because so many people were subscribed to their Go service that was apparently just to watch Game of Thrones, that they're concerned that they're going to have a mass exodus and lose subscription revenue, etc. So the scramble is on for the next Game of Thrones.
Interesting. What else you got on your mind, Nick?
Not too much else on my mind. I wanted to talk about
educate us about something.
All right, let's talk about this descent into madness. I mean, this is the Bizarro World podcast, and so there's a lot of things that are bizarre out there. And I saw someone make a poignant comment about a descent into madness and how we're at a point now in society where everyone is so offended by something that no one knows what to do about anything. The example this person was making, and it'll hit home for you because it was about a Chicago yearbook. High school in Chicago, I guess someone thought that there was a picture of kids giving a gang sign in the yearbook, which turned out not to be. They were giving the OK sign, which is apparently close to a gang sign, which I don't know anything about. Do you? I don't know anything about the OK gang sign. But anyway, that's not the point here. The point is that the kids were not giving a gang sign, but people said they were. And so the high school spent, and I'm not making this up, they recalled the yearbook, right?
Read this.
They spent $60,000. It was like $57,000 to have the whole fucking yearbook reprinted because somebody was given an OK sign. And so it's like we as a society are just like at that deer in headlights point where like we just can't do anything because we're afraid of what somebody's going to think or do or say, or a comedian can't make a joke because they're going to have to apologize for it because someone's going to be offended, or God, Quentin Tarantino can't make a movie because the female's not going to have the exact same amount of lines as the male, and so it's sexist, or whatever the fuck it is. We're at the point in society where we've reached what this person called a descent into madness, and I thought it was well put. And I'll keep going. I'm not done. Hold on.
Yeah, go. Rant.
Because
Preach, brother Nick.
It's just like, just take where we are at in the markets. I'll take it back to the markets, for example. Something I wanted to talk about last week was Kim Kardashian tweeted something about a Jack in the Box location, and the stock came off like 5% that day. And then, Wendy's tweeted at them, and then McDonald's tweeted, and Carl's Jr. tweeted. And it's like, if we're at a point in the markets where we're like, value in stocks and shedding hundreds of millions and $1 billion in market cap because Kim K sent a tweet, it's like, that's fake meat stuff, right? We talked about this before. It's like we're so far down this rabbit hole of fakeness that nothing is real anymore, and we're just selling stock because Kim K sent a fucking tweet.
And it was a kind, light tweet. She said, "I had an issue at a store today, at a location. I won't get into the details. Please respond to my email because I think it would affect other people." So, she reached out. They didn't respond. She tweeted, "Your stock gets hit by 5%. It's a fucking bizarro world out there." It's crazy.
It's crazy. That's it.
That's it. Are you going to educate us about the geologic scale?
Oh, you want to do that? Okay, I'll talk to you about the geologic scale.
I do. I learn something every week, Nick. I only do these things to learn something from you every week.
I didn't refresh myself on the article, but it goes something like this. We've talked a bit about climate change on this podcast, and we've talked about, or at least I've talked about, how over the course of human history, we've commandeered new lands and we've wiped out species, literally like wiped out every giant mammal that lived in Australia when we first arrived on that continent. And so when we see things in the news now, like reports about how we're going to lose X amount of species in the next X years or whatever it is, I always think about long periods of time, not just the past, my lifetime, for example. That's a good way to put it. Not just like the time that I've been on this planet, but hey, we've lost dozens or hundreds of species before, and it may not be just a result of humans, or anyway, just introducing skepticism into that whole debate. But a couple of stories came out in the past week that really shine a light on how little we fucking know, and how confident we are that we know much more than we do. So the first one was that scientists are realizing that the Earth is likely 1 billion years older than they once thought it was. So think about that for a minute. 1 billion years they were off by. So this isn't like a high school science project. This is like the world's best scientists, right? The same ones that are formulating opinions and theses on climate change and carbon emissions, for example. And so they got the age of the Earth wrong by 1 billion years. And so if the age of the Earth is wrong by 1 billion years, what the next question is that has to be asked, right? It's like, what else don't we know, and what else are we off on, and what else are we correlating wrong? And so the next piece of news that came out just like a week after the whole, oh, hey, we're off by 1 billion years news article was we found this fungus on Victoria Island, which is interesting because the Victoria Island is just off the coast of Vancouver, British Columbia, where a lot of the junior mining stocks that we talk about on this podcast are headquartered. So on Victoria Island, I guess there was some soft shales that were being dug through for some reason. Again, apologies, I didn't refresh myself on the article, but the point is this: they found some fossilized fungi that were 500 million to 1 billion years older than the previously known fungi. And so 1 week we're learning the Earth is 1 billion years older than we first thought it was. Not 10 million, not 100 million, not 200 million, not 500 million, but 1 billion fucking years older. And then the next week we learned that, vegetation is also 500 million to 1 billion years older than we once thought it was. And so when I see things like, again, the mass eradication of species, or we only have a dozen years to reduce emissions to, or the course of the planet is going to be irrevocably reversed, or irrevocably altered, or irreversibly altered. I think that we need to think about geologic scale and geologic time, and how little we really know, and how long it really takes things to change, and how adaptable the Earth really is, and that's it. This isn't a climate skeptic talk. This is a we don't really fucking know anything. We're just little peons talk.
Well, and speaking of not knowing anything, there was a really good article earlier this month on Bloomberg, and I'll go ahead and put a link up to it. And it was titled "The Aliens Among Us." And so it talks about how for the past several years, the U.S. military has observed an increase in what it calls unexplained aerial phenomena. And basically, it's it says well-trained, I'm gonna just read it verbatim, well-trained military pilots claimed to observe small spherical objects flying in formation. Others say they've seen white tic-tac shaped vehicles. Aside from drones, all engines rely on burning fuel to generate power. But these vehicles all had no air intake, no wind, and no exhaust. They also appear to exceed all known aircraft in speed and have been described by a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense as embodying a truly radical technology. That sounds a whole lot more in depth than what we've heard in the past in the public before from the military. In the past, we've heard, a video leak. We've seen videos leak. We've heard pilots come out and say, yeah, it could have been this, it could have been that.
Yep.
This suggests a level of detail that I haven't read in the public domain before. Have you?
No, this was the furthest it's gone. They cited some pilots, as you just said, that I had seen flashes about years ago, like when the video leaked, there was some pilot audio saying like, what the fuck was that? Or I've never seen anything like that before. And so
right.
I had seen some of that years ago, but never, like you say, compiled together like this, and not the new information about the no air intake and the no exhaust and flying faster than any other known aircraft. I mean, that shit's just crazy, right? And they were careful to say that while they're calling it a UFO, that they still think it's of terrestrial origin. But the shit's crazy, man.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. Again, I'll put a link up, but yeah, there's the more you think right?
Yeah, and just to add one more thing onto that, I think it was this week or last week that we discovered 17 or 18 new planets, one of which is in an orbit that could sustain life. And it's like, look, man, the further we can like see out into space and the more information we get, we're continually finding these planets. Yeah, there's so much we don't know that we haven't seen and maybe that the authorities have kept from us. But yeah, a whole lot of interesting stuff out there.
Keep an open mind, people. Keep an open mind.
That's
what
right.
else you got, Nick? Are we going to do a stock of the week? I want to talk Hydro 66 because we've mentioned it several times in the past. They just struck a deal that I think will make it the go-to public vehicle for leverage to a rising crypto price if cryptos do indeed continue to run and rise. There's a very solid business model that underpins the company. We've talked about it before, but do you want to talk Hydro a little bit?
Yeah, it's not going to be my stock of the week, but we should talk about it. Bitcoin remains up over $8,500, which is highly profitable for high power computing outfits like Hydro that maintain megawatts of capacity, hash rate capacity for solving the advanced computer problems known as algorithms that ultimately result in the production of cryptocurrencies when you use computing power to figure them out. I think we've sort of explained that on this podcast, but that's part of what Hydro does. They lease people space to do that in their data center in Sweden that offers highly redundant and cheap power from nearby hydro sources, of which there is an excess of supply. And they have sort of experience in this market that they use to dictate to them when it might be advantageous to dedicate more resources to solving those mathematical problems. And in layman terms, basically they are able to know when they should buy more crypto mining equipment and when they shouldn't. And recently they, as we're now learning in retrospect through the management discussion and analysis that came out, as well as a press release that came out last week. They identified an opportunity earlier this year to buy some equipment and put it to use. And as we now know, the Bitcoin price subsequently has risen, and so they're generating nice cash flow from that. And then the big deal that was announced this week after market was cheese. It was a deal that they made really no bones about it in the press release, would make them the industry leading blockchain infrastructure company in the world. And
the world, Craig, the world.
Yeah, in the entire world. I think they said in the industry, but the industry is global, and so that means the world. I mean, they already had the largest center of its kind in Europe, but now these assets, I believe, are in Texas and Louisiana, and bring, gosh, what's the number that sticks in my mind? 125,000 square feet of such space to put these racks of servers on, as well as a proprietary rack, which I also thought was important to put these servers on, that allow for maximum efficiency and cooling, which is important because these machines get very hot, and so when you're paying to cool them, you're basically eating into your mining profits, right? It's an input cost, and so if you can have a proprietary way to keep those servers cool, that's certainly an advantage. And look, nobody's really had a lot of time to digest this deal. We record this on a Friday, and the deal just came out Thursday after market close. So I don't really think the market understands it yet. It's not to a definitive agreement point yet. I believe it's just an LOI. There's $40 million that needs to be raised. It's a big deal. The entity, once the deal closes, would have something like 250 million shares out, but as I see it, would have to become a proxy for the entire sector for investors that wanted equity exposure to the Bitcoin, high power computing, co-location, crypto mining space without buying the crypto coins themselves, and perhaps with a bit of diversification into the other businesses that Hydro participates in. They should flock to this stock now. Just as Hive was a proxy ETF in the previous one up, Hydro should now, if they close this deal, become the de facto or the go-to name for crypto in the equity space. And if they get it done, it looks like it could be this quarter. So it's certainly exciting.
Absolutely. You see that, everybody? You don't have to be smart. You just have to hang out with smart people.
Well, you brought the deal to me, so Gerardo's the smart one.
Oh, I was alluding to the fact that I said, hey, I want to talk about Hydro 66, and then I just let you run with it. And you broke that down beautifully, Nick. So good work. Good work. I'm biased. I'm a shareholder. I've been adding to my position. I will continue to add to my position at these prices. So, go dig into Hydro 66. We'll put a link up to the press release. It is definitely a world-class team of people with some world-class facilities, serially successful people that have monetized assets in the past. And even if all cryptos do is hold at these levels, that thing will be spitting out cash left and right. If we get a run, it's off to the races. So congrats to Hydro and the team over there. It's a LOI, hasn't closed yet, but appealing as all heck.
And speaking of serially successful people, if we're going to do a stock of the week and you want to hear me talk for another 2 minutes, my stock of the week, because this will be out next week, was going to be Magna Gold, and the serial successful person that's running that, Arturo Bonillas from Timmins Gold fame, but has exited, I think it's 5 mining projects successfully, either taken them into production or had them sold out. They have been trying to get a transaction approved by the exchange for, Jesus Christ, it seems like a couple of months now, but that is now done, and Magna Gold is going to start trading something like June 5th, I think it is. So I just wanted to give a heads up, something to keep an eye on, because they have a project in Mexico that Arturo is quite excited about, that they've got targets identified on, and that they have plenty of money to drill, because a lot of folks, including you and me, wrote them checks to do so. So excited to see that stock trading, and think it should do well. Independently of a bull market, but certainly in a gold bull market.
Agreed. They have a very straightforward strategy. It's one that they've executed multiple times, as Nick mentioned. The strategy is simple. Look for near surface oxidized gold ounces. And, they think that they can fast track to 1 million ounces by the end of this year and be in a scenario where they can make a production decision with very low capex. This is something that Arturo has done in the past, I believe 5 times, if I'm not mistaken. I know we spoke with him at Beaver Creek last year. I think he was 5 for 5 on his last 5 companies, getting them into production. And in his words, this is going to be not a 5 for 6. This is going to be 6 for 6, and this is going to be his retirement. So great share structure, excellent project. The network that Arturo and his team has in Mexico should not be underestimated. I don't think that this property will be the only one that we see rolled into the company. So, yeah, take a peek. Magna Gold.
Good.
Nick, you have a birthday party to get to.
The birthday party is Sunday. We are taking her. She's 3. We're taking her to lunch today. There's this little... it used to be the Spokane airport before they built the big one on the outskirts of town, but the old airport downtown still has like little planes that take off every day that like fly around and stuff, people that have private planes. And there's a little cafe where you can take kids to have lunch and watch the planes take off and land. And she always points out planes when they're flying around. So we're going to take her there and get a bite to eat and let her watch the planes take off and land. Yeah, headed there right now.
Awesome. Well, happy birthday to her. Everybody have a great week. You listen to this on Monday. I hope your weekend was awesome. Anything else you want to add, Nick?
No, that's it.
All right. Episode 21, Bizarro World. Have a great week, everybody. Be nice to each other.
See ya.